Hello, this is Dave from the Wizard's Keep in Muncie, Indiana, and I'm continuing my countdown of my top 60 favorite games of all time. Today we're going to do number 40 through 31. And to start that off, my number 40 is a game called Kingsburg. Now, Kingsburg is a kind of a dice placement game, sort of very similar to a worker placement game. You've got like different spots on the board where you're going to be able to place dice, but as sort of like workers. But the difference is on your turn, you're going to roll the dice, and then you take those dice and you place them in different locations based on their value. So if you roll, and you can kind of combine dice if you want to get the bigger number. So let's say you roll your six-sided dice and you got like a 6 and a 3. You could take that 6 and place it on the 6. You could take the 3, place it on the 3, or you can combine them together and put them on the 9 location. Now, I kind of like that because it gives you a lot of different options of what you can do or where you can place your different dice on your turn. But also, you have to look and see what your opponents, because what you're going to do is you're going to, in turn order, is going to determine placing the dice. So you may look and see what dice your opponent have, what numbers they've rolled. So you have to kind of consider that when placing your dice, because you got to be careful that you're not leaving yourself where. Let's say you only have a 5 left, and your opponent's got a 3 and a 2, and so they put on their dice on the 5 location. Well, now you can't place your die there; that spot's already taken, and that you kind of lose that action as that die, is wasted because you don't have a place to put it now. So you got to kind of think around, figure out what your opponents are going to be doing, where they might be placing their dice to generate resources, or you could then do the opposite. You might be able to block your opponent, make them waste a die. So there's some interaction there, which is kind of lacking in some Euro games, but also I just like mostly just the different options every turn. You kind of roll the dice, go, okay, now what am I going to do? Where can I put these people? Where can I generate these resources? So that's my number 40. That is Kingsburg. My number 39 is a game that's all about the theme of the game, is what I really like it. The game mechanics are fine. They're pretty solid, but they're pretty simple. But it's the theme of the game that really kind of immerses me in it, that I really like about it. And that is Last Night on Earth. Now, there's a lot of different zombie games out there. It's a very popular theme. But this one's probably one of my favorites. And the reason being, because I think it just really captures the genre well. In Last Night on Earth, you've got 2 teams. You got a zombie team and a hero team. And if you're playing 2 players, that one player plays zombies, the other plays 4 heroes. If you're playing 6 players, then 2 people are going to work together as a zombie team, and then 4 people are going to play the heroes with 1 hero each. And each of the heroes is just kind of like your typical archetypes that you see in different zombie films and zombie stories. So you got like the gruff sheriff, you've got like the high school jock, you've got the school nurse, you've got the prom queen, you've got the vagabond. And based on the character, they're going to have different skills or different abilities. Like the nurse can heal people, for example. There's also numerous different scenarios that you can play. And all the scenarios are kind of like your, straight out of, once again, zombie movies and zombie shows. You've got like a Night of the Living Dead type scenario where the heroes are just trying to survive the night in the farmhouse. The zombie player wins if they kill 2 of the 4 heroes, or if they ever get like 9 zombies inside the house. The zombie player they have an advantage because they always have a handful of cards, and those cards allow them to play things to modify dice, move their zombies faster, spawn more zombies. Heroes don't actually start with cards; they have to go loot different buildings to get cards, and so it's kind of like Walking Dead or something. You have to go out and send people out on supply runs to kind of find different equipment like chainsaws and baseball bats or a med kit or something like that. So it's zombie movie, zombie TV show in a box, and that's Last Night on Earth. Now my number 38 is another one that also has a strong theme, which is a little odd because in a lot of ways it's a Euro game, and Euro games aren't known for their strong themes. And that is Pandemic. Now, Pandemic is kind of a classic game now. It's been out almost 10 years, I think. And it kind of started the cooperative game craze. There was cooperative games before Pandemic, but Pandemic's the one that really kind of caused that kind of concept to explode. And for good reason, because it's just really good. In Pandemic, each person plays a scientist, and you have different skills based on the type of scientist that you're playing, and you're going to work together trying to decide what's the best thing for each person to do on their turn on how to combat different diseases. Because in the end, what you're trying to do is cure disease. There's 4 different diseases that are trying to take over the planet, and you're kind of working together trying to eradicate these diseases. But you got to be careful because the diseases, they're going to spread, and that they can kind of snowball or have a domino effect, which is so you think you've got everything under control, and then suddenly you get a bad pandemic, and then there's just an outbreak. Like one city explodes, and that's going to send disease to all the neighboring cities, and that might cause another city to explode, and so on. So I kind of like that. The game is always tense, because even if you feel like you're doing a good job, it's like, we haven't won this game until it's done. And I like that. So you're always engaged. There's never a moment you can relax in the game, and that's Pandemic. My number 37 is another deck building game. I'm starting to see a little theme here in some of these choices, and that is because I like deck building games. I like how in deck building games you start off with a small deck and you're going to add different cards and it's going to snowball. So by the beginning of the game, you're not doing a whole lot, but by the end you've got very dynamic choices or dynamic turns where you're doing all sorts of things. I like it. I like that. It kind of feels like feels satisfying. Feels like you're building towards something. And my number 37 is, in a small box here, is Hero Realms. Now, I kind of combined Hero Realms and Star Realms together, so it's kind of, both of those kind of fit this slot. But I've kind of chose the Hero Realms, or I like Hero Realms better than Star Realms. And one of the reasons I just tend to like fantasy over science fiction, but also I think Hero Realms is just a better game. Star Realms came out first, so Hero Realms had the opportunity to kind of improve upon some of the things that Star Realms does. And also, one thing that makes them different, because the base set of Hero Realms and Star Realms, straight out of the basic box, is just the same game with a different theme on them. But the expansions that Hero Realms has is really what changes or puts it over the top. And what it has is these character packs. Whereas, as I said, most deck building games are going to start kind of the same deck. Well, these character packs do a couple things. One, they give you a different starting deck for depending on your character class. So, like the wizard's going to start with different cards than the rogue or the ranger or the fighter. So, it kind of already pushes you in a different strategy from the beginning. And I like that because, one, with those different themes to those, every time you play it can be different. Like one time you say, oh, I want to play the wizard this time. And another time you're like, oh, I want to play the cleric. So you can kind of try out different strategies based on the character you play. And that's one I really like about the different character add-on decks that just really puts this game to the next level. My number 36 is a game from Days of Wonder called Yamatai. Now, this one, it has, like all Days of Wonder, has stunning components, beautiful art, but the game itself is also really, really good, as expected from Days of Wonder. It's kind of a puzzle game, which I kind of like. Every turn you're kind of figuring out, okay, you got a lot of choices, but you're kind of figuring out what is it I need to do to maximize my points. And every turn is kind of is that. So you're trying to figure out how you're moving across the board, connecting different like culture tokens, which you can use those to turn in for different powers. And I like that because you got to look at the board and you're trying to figure out, okay, I have several different options here. What is the best option for me to to generate the most points? And I like that a lot about Yamatai. Now, my number 35 is a game, 1960 Making of a President. I'm a big fan of politics and a big fan of political history, so this game appeals to me a lot because of that. But which is also kind of why I put it over, in my personal opinion, over like Twilight Struggle and other similar games by the same designers, is because of I just like the political theme. And it's amazing how the Electoral College somehow works really well as for game mechanics. Because what you're going to do on your turn in 1960 Making a President, you've got different cards, and you can play the cards for their effects, and those effects are usually they're tied into some historical significance that happened in the 1960 election. Like there's a card where the Kennedy, you're either, in this game it's a two-player only game, you're either playing Kennedy or Nixon, the two main candidates that ran for president in 1960. But you can play cards that have events. Like one of them, for example, is referring to how Dwight Eisenhower was really slow in his endorsement to to Nixon. And so that has an effect on the Nixon player that the Kennedy player can kind of play. Or you can play a card for just resource cubes, and you place those cubes on different states to gain influence in that state, trying to win those states' electoral votes. And so I just really like the theme of it. How many times have people said after an election, going, "Man, I wish we could do that one over." And 1960 of making of a president kind of lets you do that. I like that about that one. My number 34 is from Red Raven Games, and that's the next entry from Ryan Lockett, and that's City of Iron. Now, City of Iron doesn't get talked about quite as much as some of his as some of his other more popular games like Near and Far and Islebound and Above and Below. And it's really kind of a shame because this one is really, really good, as are those, and should have more attention placed on it. It's kind of like a deck building game as well. You're kind of acquiring different cards, but you're not going to be getting as many cards over the course of the game as you are in a deck building game. The other thing that's interesting is when you play the cards, you get to determine the order that you play. You play all your cards face up in front of you on a turn, and at the end of the turn, you're going to determine the order they go into your discard pile. When your deck is empty, you're going to just flip your discard pile over, so you've determined the order of the how the cards are going to come up the next time. So it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit of a memory game and a little bit of a strategy on how you're playing your cards to kind of determine how those cards come up again. And I kind of like that. That's very different. And plus, you've got this stunning Ryan Lockett art, and just kind of immerses you into this kind of weird theme. I'm waiting for a role-playing game to come out about this kind of universe. I don't know. I haven't heard anything if that's going to happen, but it'd be awesome if it did. My number 33 is another Euro game, because I'm a big fan of Euro games, and that is Grand Austria Hotel. In Grand Austria Hotel, you're running a hotel, and you've got like your hotel restaurant has different guests coming in, and so what you're trying to do is you're trying to fulfill the orders of these different guests. Some of them want wine, some of them want strudel, some of them want coffee, and you're trying to and depending on the difficulty or of the guest, I don't know how difficult their order is how many points they're going to give you when you fulfill that order. But you also, how you generate these resources is also a dice drafting game. So you're going to roll dice, and those are going to get laid out on different actions. And depending on the number of dice rolled for a particular action, so like one of them is like the twos. Like you take all the twos and you put them in a line. So let's say there's like 4 twos. You take the 2, and what that's usually going to give you as action is your choice between generating some resources between wine and coffee. Well, if there was 4 dice there, you could generate up to 4 in a combination of the coffee or the wine. So the number of dice matters. But if there was only 2 dice there, you'd only get like a coffee and a wine. So you got to have to consider that based on how the dice get laid out each turn. But also on your needs that you're going to need to kind of to get different guests, because once you fulfill their like breakfast order, then they're going to go retire to their room. So you're going to get points for filling rooms as well. And so there's a lot of different things that you're trying to do in Grand Austria Hotel, and I know it's a theme you don't see very often either. So I kind of like that as well. My number 32 is it's probably a theme that you do see a fair amount of anyway, and that is Suburbia. Suburbia is kind of one of the quintessential like city building games, but this one I think is the best. Just how the interaction, so the different tiles you use. It is essentially a tile laying game. You're getting different tiles which represent different type of buildings, airports, different zones. Kind of, if you're familiar with like SimCity, I think SimCity was a little more basic. It had you had commercial zones, industrial zone, residential zones. You sort of have that in Suburbia, but they're even more detailed, because you may have a industrial zone, but in this case it might be a specific type of factory, or it might be a slaughterhouse. And so the slaughterhouse is going to generate points and population, because that's really what whoever has the most population is going to be the winner in Suburbia. So the slaughterhouse might generate certain population bonuses for you, or money bonuses based on the number of restaurants that are in the city. And it's Suburbia, so you're just a suburb of the same city as the other players. So there's some interaction based on how other people build their cities, because if you may not have many restaurants in your city. Somebody else might have a lot in theirs. So getting that slaughterhouse is going to be advantageous to you because it's going to generate a lot of money for you, a lot of income, because there's tons of different restaurants that need to be served. So I like that kind of actually creates some interaction, and you have to kind of pay attention what your opponents are, how they're building their cities, and it's not just an efficiency game, though you have to be efficient with your city building. The other thing is you also have different random goals each game. There's always going to be, I think, a number of goals equal to the number of players. Plus, every player has a hidden goal of their own, and those goals are a wide range. It could be like have the most industrial tiles, or have the biggest lakes, or make the most money, or on the opposite, maybe it's make the least amount of money. So you've got, and some of those are public knowledge, and some of them are secret. You won't find out until the end of the game. So there you kind of figure out a little bit what your opponent's trying to do, and kind of guess based on how they're building their city. So I like that one quite a bit, and that is Suburbia. And our last one, my number 31, at least for this video, is one that I've talked about quite a bit. I think it came up in both my other videos, my Gateway Games video. I guess it didn't really show up in my under $25 retail game video, but it did show up my Gateway game. It's kind of my go-to Gateway game, but I also like the game a lot as well. And that is King of Tokyo. Now, King of Tokyo is, in a lot of ways, a Yahtzee variant. And I hate Yahtzee. It's just roll dice and see what happens. But King of Tokyo has a lot more going on because you've got giant monsters that are battling against each other. And you can kind of make some choices with those dice you roll. You're either trying to get victory points, you can play very pacifistic and just be trying to race victory points. Or you can try to smash your opponent's other giant monsters into submission. Or you can get like different... build up on energy to get different powers for your monster that can allow you to do all sorts of neat things. And that is my number 31, and that's King of Tokyo. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and hope you enjoy past videos that I've made, and I will hopefully you'll enjoy future videos I make. If you have, as always, if you have any questions about any of these games or any other games, feel free to stop into the Wizard's Keep or post on Facebook. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Until the next video, I'm David Barnett from the Wizard's Keep, and thank you for watching.